What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 388. I'm your host. My name is Marshall. And joining me on the bed, yeah, it's Pro Tour time. It's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, you don't look great, man. Are you okay?
I'm sitting here with my ankle elevated because I decided to take a jump shot and land on Hall of Famer Ben Stark, who has great insights about Limited, maybe less insights about how to avoid ankle injuries.
Yeah, Bruce Bowen not in the Hall of Fame. Ben Stark is, though.
Yes, so I rolled my ankle. I didn't sprain it, but I am currently wrapping it, and it's got an ice pack, and it's elevated.
You're doing the right thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, because sometimes people ignore these lighter ones, and they're like, it'll be fine, and then it takes way longer. So it's not giving you any pain, though, right? You can focus in on the task at hand.
Oh, I find I do a lot better when I have a little bit of pain.
Oh, geez. All right. Well, we're not going into that. So what we're going to do for this week on the show is we're in Nashville for the Pro Tour. In fact, Luis and I just got back from having wonderful fried chicken that you can get here, which we also had for lunch.
Yeah, this show's sponsored by Hattie B's.
Yeah, apparently. and now we're on the eve of the Pro Tour. And what we took last week was we said we wanted to do our Amonkhet first impressions. But our first impressions had a lot of concern built into them, right? And, on the show, we take that seriously, that we keep it real with you, the listener. We don't like to, try to sugarcoat things or make it seem like everything's always great. We want to, voice our real concerns and let you know how we really feel. That way, when we say we love a set, you can trust it. And if we say, hey, there's some things that could be wrong here, you can trust that too. But one thing we didn't do, and that we want to do this week, is to really dive into what's going on in the format. We talked about big picture things. We talked about things that could happen down the line. But we did not talk too much about the things that are happening and that we need to actually deal with. And that's what we're going to do on this episode of the show. We've got a lot more information about the format now after having drafted it a ton of Magic Online. We also had a GP last weekend and now have had a chance to interact with a lot of pros about what's going on in the format coming into the Pro Tour. So that's what we're going to be covering on this episode of the show. Before we get into that, of course, I want to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Please do check them out. They have the best Magic website on the internet. If you want to go and you want to get some content for free, you put up some content.
I do. I actually made a lot of content for this week. You can also check out our YouTube page, youtube.com/channelfireball. We've got putting a lot more videos up, and including stuff like, Paulo's 3 tips to make playtesting better, 3 mistakes you're making in playtesting. So.
Yeah, and they can look forward to some from you as well along these lines. Some, not necessarily just a draft video type stuff.
Yeah, we're expanding into more than just gameplay videos. So I filmed some stuff in anticipation of the Pro Tour, and it'll be going up over these next couple days that I'm excited about.
Is it good or?
Oh, it's great.
I mean, I'm gonna.
It's top 3 videos I made this week.
Wait, you ranked the videos you made this week on your video this week?
I made a video about the top videos I made this week.
Hopefully that's not the number one. But yeah, so please do check that out as well. Of course, you can get there via YouTube. And, my draft videos go up there, Luis's gameplay videos, and then this new content as well. So really great stuff on Channel Fireball. And while you're there, you can pick up singles, sealed product, all of the stuff that you need to play this great game. And you can get it all in one stop at channelfireball.com. The show is also brought to you by you via the Patreon. That's right. You can support the show directly. If this is the type of thing that you like, if you're like, hey, this show, makes me happier. It's enriched my life a little bit, or it's made me a better Magic player. I've won some more booster packs from it. Any of these type of things. And you thought, you know what? I want to give back to it. You can do it via the Patreon. We have it set up that way very much on purpose. And we appreciate each and every one of you who help keep the show going and help us moving forward with that. Thank you very much for that. It's patreon.com/limited resources. One of the really cool things you get to is that Patreon has a lot of, it's not just a monetization tool, it also is an interaction tool. And it allows us to reach this group of patrons and say, hey, what can we give you? And one of the things that they wanted is we want to be able to ask questions. And they do. We get Patreon question of the week. And this one, it says, hey, Marshall, hey, Luis, but really, Luis, this one is very much aimed at you. This comes from James, who says, first of all, I love the show. Thank you, James. Second, since I started playing Magic a few years ago, I've wanted to go competitive with Magic. I'm currently a senior in high school going to college next year. Now, this is, for James, of course, this is a big time in James's life. A lot of paths are going to be formed. It can be changed, but, this will definitely inform at least the immediate future here for James. He says, any advice on what I could do to realistically play professionally? Now, I've never been a pro Magic player before. I've been around pro Magic and also pro poker for quite a while now, and I've seen the ups and the downs that come with it. But I mean, this is really for you, Luis, because you're kind of king of the pro Magic players in many ways. You know everybody. You've seen the tops and the bottoms, the highs and the lows. I'm going to amend James's question a little too. He says, "Do you have any advice on what he could realistically do to play?" I also want to know, should he?
The short answer is you should not. I would not recommend that anyone set out with a goal of becoming a professional Magic player, which might seem weird for me to say because that was my occupation. I say was because I'm very much a professional Magic content producer, professional
person. Yeah.
Like, it is my profession. Magic is one of the things I do and a very important part of my life. The definition of professional Magic player of like I go to tournaments to win money, right now it's not set up in a way that I believe is a lifestyle that you should strive for. I think that there are ways you can make it, and a big part of that is making content, that supplementing that. Like, there's never been a single year where I was a pro Magic player that I was not also making content. In fact, I started that way. So adventureson.com /blackborder.com.
And then you moved over to Channel Fireball.
Yeah, a couple years after that. I think that Magic is awesome, and I think that there's a lot it can offer you, but a career in playing professional Magic is one that I think a lot of people more fall into it than set out to achieve it, because I would never say you should not go to college, instead you should do this. So what I think you can do, and I think that ways you can give yourself a good shot, is get better at Magic, practice, play Magic online. I think that's a big part of it. Find other people who are interested in qualifying for the Pro Tour and take it step by step. Don't go all in on it. There are things you should go all in on. I just don't believe this is one of them. I think that it can be rewarding to qualify for the Pro Tour, string that qualification into another one, hit silver, hit gold, maybe you spike something and it goes even better. And at that point you can make a decision of like, hey, what do I want to do with my time? But saying like, all right, I'm going to spend a year dedicating myself to becoming a pro Magic player, I don't believe is the path. I think that you should start by trying to qualify for the Pro Tour and just seeing how that goes, getting a better feel for it. But you're going to college next year. You can do both. College does afford you, depending on how much time you spend, some amount of time. It's not all just about school, but I would not forsake developing your life otherwise in order to chase this thing, because that's just not how it generally works for the people who do it.
Yeah, I have two things I want to get. I think this is a question that many people besides James have, which is why I'm taking a little extra time on it. Tell me numbers. I know you don't have perfect numbers, but if I'm a gold pro, how much do I stand to make in a year?
If you're a gold pro and you're winning at the level of a gold pro, which is basically you can be a gold pro without top 8ing a Pro Tour, or maybe you top 8 one and lose in the quarters, but if you do better than that, you end up platinum most of the time. So I'm going to assume if you're not top 8ing a Pro Tour and you're a gold pro, there's a chance you don't make money off your tournament winnings.
Okay.
There's a chance you lose money off tournament winnings.
So there's a problem. So that leaves us with platinums, who I assume do make money over the course of the year then.
They do. I still think that because in order to hit gold or platinum, you generally have to go to Grand Prix. Grand Prix, the prize payout, like the actual money you walk away with from a Grand Prix, tends to be less than what you spent to get yourself there and pay for a hotel.
Your ROI does not exceed.
You get pro points though. So
yeah.
And when you hit platinum, you get benefits. You get appearance fees, you get flights, you get a hotel, and those add up. So Grand Prix are profitable if you're platinum or on the path to get platinum. I still think a platinum player looking at just tournament winnings, again, without like winning a Pro Tour or without getting to Worlds, for example, because Worlds is another tournament with a very good payout, you're still not looking at you're not walking away with $70,000. You're walking away with closer to like $30,000 maybe, and that's not nothing. And it does afford you the time, and you're in a good position to make content, which can be quite lucrative if you do a good job of it. But you're not going to get rich off doing this, and in fact, chasing it and failing means you actually lose a lot of money,
right?
Because
and time,
you spend $20,000 on travel expenses in a year. It's not difficult to do that,
right?
And it's not the sort of thing you can't start from that place. You have to do it incrementally. And sometimes you spike. Sometimes someone wins their first Pro Tour and is platinum and is like, okay, they just like kind of go backwards into it. But realistically, for a lot of people, what happens is you qualify for a Pro Tour, you lose at that Pro Tour, you get beaten very badly, but you kind of know what you're doing a little better now. You know how to prepare better. You qualify for another Pro Tour, you do okay in that Pro Tour, and then maybe you either RPTQ or qualify for another Pro Tour, or you top 25 and qualified anyway. And then you all of a sudden have strong enough points to be silver, then you're qualified for enough Pro Tours based on that you're able to hit gold, like you work your way up. But you still are allowed to and able and encouraged to do other things with your time as well, not just... Basically, the people who come at this from the approach of like, I want to do what Owen Turnbull does, which is to play Magic 50 hours a week and to play in the Pro Tours. I'm going to quit my job / don't get a job / whatever. Like, I'm going to...
forsake other things for this.
Right. I'm going to set aside what the other things I'm doing. I'm going to dedicate myself to this. That's what I'm going to do. I think most of the time that's just not going to end well for you.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because when you look at it from a big picture perspective, the types of things that we talk about like this, where, thinking about being a professional athlete or a musician, right? Something where you have a very, very high ceiling, even if the success rate is relatively low. You could definitely make a case for, I'm going to take this time in my life, the next 3 years or whatever, and I'm going to go all in for this, right? And I'm going to see if I can make it in music or as an actor or whatever it is that, you want to do. And it can be a reasonable decision, because when you do hit, it's like we were talking about, you spike, right? You hit this huge, you become where you never have to work again, or you opens up all these other doors for you. But Magic isn't that big. It isn't, as an ecosystem, big enough that when you do make it, and let's say you do spike a PT and you get up to platinum for a year, that year ends, and it's, what have you done for me lately? Like, you have to keep doing that. And the sustainability of that is very, very difficult, which is why I think that your advice was spot on, Luis, to ease your way in. When I quit my job to do Magic stuff, it wasn't to play, it was to make content, but it's a similar type of thing. There's not that many people that can make Magic content full-time either, right? And what I did is I built up the podcast over the course of years before I actually quit my job. And then I still knew I was taking a big risk, because nobody had done, Kickstarters and Patreons and stuff. So it was like, well, here we go. Let's see if this works, and there was every chance that it didn't work and that I'd have to relegate it back to a smaller portion of my life where I couldn't really put the effort in that I wanted, but I had to have a day job to accommodate it,
You did not quit your job and then next week record episode 1 of Limited Resources.
Exactly.
And nor should you have. You should not quit your job and then go to a PPTQ for the first time the week after that, saying you're going to go pro.
Yeah.
And so, yes, while the short answer for both doing Magic content, like Marshall, like what you do, and what I do, we both do that, or
same.
Playing professional Magic. The short answer is don't do it, but the long answer is more nuanced, as longer answers tend to be. It's not that you can't do this or shouldn't do this. It's that you should do this in a way that takes into account the risk that it might not work. Whereas for a lot of people's experience, going to school and figure out what you want to do has a higher hit rate. I'm not saying that's perfect for everyone, because it's definitely not. A lot of people go to school, come out, and still have trouble getting a job. It's not like a golden ticket.
No.
But at the end of it, you still have that experience, and you still have what you learned there. And if you go too all in on this stuff, I just don't think that's the healthy way to approach it. And that, there are good paths and there are bad paths, and I don't want to dissuade, and neither do you, people from pursuing their passions. Obviously that's how we ended up here, and we love our jobs. They're great, but neither of us was just like, all right, we're going to roll the dice, and if this doesn't work, what am I going to do?
No.
It was all just like, all right, how can we hedge and make it the safest possible while opening ourselves up to the possibility of, when this goes well, then we move all in. Like, yes. That's what, quitting your job and just going with the podcast was for you.
Yes.
That's what starting Channel Fireball was for me. Like,
yes.
It was like, I can afford now to try to start this new website with,
starting from nothing.
Right. Starting with the guys who are now Channel Fireball, the other partners, were knowing that there's a chance this fails, but I'm okay if it does.
Yeah.
This isn't me saying, like, I'm going to take all my savings and do something that I don't know anything about. Because, 5 years earlier, I would not have known anything about that.
Right.
And I didn't do that. I spent a couple of years kind of working my way to this position. So
right.
It's like a lot of things in life, which is there's never guarantees. There's risks. The rewards are there. You just have to approach it in a way that that mitigates the risk of ruin the best possible.
James, thanks for the question, and for those of you who don't care about being a professional Magic player, thanks for listening to us talk about it for a little while. But I really do think that there's a lot of people that care about that question a lot. Okay, let's get to Amonkhet here. Luis, you have in your hands a crack-a-pack.
I get to crack the pack this time.
You do.
This is from McLovin. I suspect not a real name.
It's close to his real name.
All right.
It is a version of his real name. Can you get a masterpiece just once? Jeez.
Yeah, I hope so. We're starting with Winged Shepherd. 6 mana, 3/3 flying vigilance, cycling of a white.
I do like that card.
It's a fine card.
Yeah.
I basically always play it if I'm white. I haven't cut this very often.
No, it's a good card.
I'd be disappointed if I first picked it, but it's a card I can see first picking.
Definitely.
Unlike the next card, Illusory Wrappings. It makes creature into an 0/2. We're not taking that card.
No.
Next up is Benefaction of Ronus. The reveal the top 5. Put creatures or enchantments into your hand. I've never played with that card.
I haven't. I tried it once. I had a bunch of cartouches, but I saw a lot of people playing it at the GP. We're going to talk about the state of the format, and this will be relevant to it, but I just feel like cards like that are too slow.
Yeah.
Even if you get the 2 cards off of it, you stand to take way too much damage for playing a slow card like that.
And that card fails a lot of the time.
That's right.
Pitiless Vizier is next. The 4/2 that gets indestructible when you cycle. Medium. Worse than Winged Shepherd.
Yep.
Decision Paralysis. We will not be paralyzed here. This is tap 2 creatures, then untap for 4 mana.
Yeah, this card has proven not good.
Not good.
Yeah.
Scribe of the Mindful, another very bad card. 2/2 that gets a instant or sorcery back.
Yep.
Horned Kopesh. Better than it looks, according to a lot of people.
It's also honed Kopesh, but
Honed. There we go.
Kopesh.
Horned Kopesh.
There you go. Honed Kopesh.
Horned Kopesh.
No, stop it. You said horned Kopesh, and it's honed Kopesh.
Well, whatever. It's crap.
I think it stinks.
I think it's quite bad. I do see there's situations where you want to play it. We're not taking it over Winged Shepherd. At least I'm not going to.
I'm definitely not.
All right, what are your thoughts on Bitterblade Warrior? 2/2 that you can exert to give it +1/+0 and Death Touch.
Good.
Better than Winged Shepherd?
Yes, I would take it over Winged Shepherd. It always makes a cut in my green decks, and it pulls its weight. I'm never super impressed by it, but I always play it, and it's always like, yep, doing its
Fine
job.
card.
Yep.
All right, Nephcrop Entangler, the 2/1 that exerts to become a 3/3 trample. I like this one more than Bitterblade Warrior.
Everything that says exert on it is powerful in my mind, and this one is in a much more exert-friendly color.
Yeah, and it's, I think, a better attacker in a lot of the ways you want it to be, which is that it survives combat with most other 3/2 or 2/2.
That's right. Yeah, it has that extra point of toughness, and then it also has wears combat tricks pretty well too.
Manglehorn is our first uncommon. Not a card I'm prone to main deck.
I haven't main decked
2/2 that
yet.
eats artifacts.
Yeah.
Lay Bare the Heart, the 1 in a black discard card.
Where are you at on this one? I actually had a chat with Kenji about this one. He likes it.
I tend to play it.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't know if it's sideboard or main, but it's close enough.
It's a 2-drop, and like a lot of other 2-drops, it's good on turn 2 and not good later. But because cycling pushes people to have like slightly more expensive cards, they might have Sandworm in their hand and they're on like 6 mana where they're just kind of keeping it in their hand.
Yeah, it's much better later than your average 2-drop.
Yeah, so I like Labor of the Heart. Not good in an aggressive deck, though.
How much do you value getting to see your opponent's hand?
Not a whole lot.
Do you think you should value it more?
I think I value it the correct amount. That's why I value it that amount.
I'm just wondering because I have noticed that, in a format that can be aggressive and can have a lot of combat tricks and instant speed stuff, that knowing that that's coming has been kind of handy. Like, I normally value it about where you have it, but...
well, the problem is, yes, that's true, but discard tends not to be as good against those decks.
Definitely.
So you end up in a situation where you want to side this out a lot of the time there.
True.
So I'm still taking Nephcrop Entangler out of this pack.
Okay.
Ooh, next up we have Shafet Monitor, the 6 mana 6/5 that cycles for 4.
I like that card a lot, and it is so slow in this format. It's kind of a signpost.
It pains
for me
that I have to take Nephcrop Entangler over this card, but I believe that we do.
Yes. I'm not going to, obviously, but...
Ooh, all right. Speaking of expensive cards, Pull from Tomorrow.
Ooh.
X blue, draw X cards, discard a card.
So this probably falls into the similar category that we just talked about, which is it's too slow to do nothing for a format where you can just get crushed so quickly. And man, tear running down my face, because this is the type of card that I want to first pick and just build around,
Yeah.
Trade,
So,
reload.
I will say that I do like some expensive cards in this format. I think Approach of the Second Sun, I think, is a legit win condition.
Okay.
I think Sandworm Convergence is a card you can build your ramp deck around. I don't think Pull from Tomorrow is, and the reason is when you spend 7 mana on Approach or 8 mana on Sandworm Convergence, those cards kind of stabilize you intrinsically, and they both win you the game. Mm-hmm. You spend 7 mana Pull from Tomorrow, you're still just getting your face beat in. So don't judge me, but I'm taking Nephcrop Entangler.
That was our last card.
Well, over Pull from Tomorrow. We've got one more card.
Ooh.
It's a foil.
Ooh.
It's a Honed Kopesh. Foil Honed Kopesh still does not break the tie. It's still Nephcrop Entangler.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that Shafet Monitor does catch my eye here. But as we're going to talk about now,
this is a perfect segue into our first deck. Nefcrop Entangler is exactly the card that these next couple decks want, and we're going to talk about red-based aggressive decks.
That's right. Primarily red-white, red-black, and red-green seem to be the three most popular.
Yeah, red-blue's a very different animal, though I think a good red-blue deck might be the best deck in the format.
Oh, really?
I think, well, we'll talk more on a different episode about that, because I want to go a little more in-depth on this one.
Okay.
But the short answer is red-blue spells when you get there is insane.
Okay.
But the long answer is...
It's hard to get there.
It's hard to get there.
You might not be incentivized to even try it.
Right. There's not that many ways to edge into it, but once you are there, it is quite good. So
let's talk about these aggressive red decks. We, coming off of the GP from last weekend, we saw these decks perform well and also be very popular to some rather extreme examples as well. We saw a Pro Tour champion draft... Bloodlust Insider in the top 8, second pick. What? That's not right? Like, I totally get on board with, like, an aggro deck being the right thing, but what?
Yeah, that's a bit extreme. I caught up with the guys from Channel Fireball Fire, and first of all, when I got added back into their limited form, because I'm not actually in their limited form the first couple weeks.
You normally are, right?
Well, we changed that because... if I want to stream and make draft videos the first couple weeks, it's I think better for me and better for them if I'm not influenced by what they have going on, and then that way they also feel like I'm not revealing anything.
So the thinking being, like, if somebody watched your stream and you let something slip, like, oh hey, this card's not very good, that was information that they had to work hard to get, that you wouldn't want that broadcast.
Well, also I kind of like just trying to figure things out myself,
of course.
As well. So. Yeah. But I got added back into the limited forum, and all I saw was Boros decks. I was like, can I get added to the non-Boros limited forums as well? I just saw 15 screenshots of red-white decks, and they're all like 15 land or 16 land.
Can I ask you, what does the forum look like? You're saying screenshot, like, are they just telling you
Magic
what their records were?
Everyone posts
a breakdown of the deck? Or?
Everyone will post just tons of Magic Online decks along with their records and short notes about each deck.
Okay, and you were seeing a lot of successful red-white decks?
Yes, there was a ton of 3-0 red-white decks, and... it got to the point where it's just like, okay, what's going on, guys? And, we talked to them. We actually didn't make it to the limited meeting. We got to talk to them about it, though. And, like, it just, they, like many other people currently, like fast, aggressive decks.
That's right. And red-white being the premier.
Red-white is the premier one. Mainly, I think, because white has Gust Walker and Talkrop Elite are the two really high-impact aggressive cards.
Absolutely.
And I think that's our first point here, because those cards and Nefcrop and Tangler share an ability, and that's Exert.
Yes.
So... one of the reasons that aggressive decks, I think, are so successful is that Exert is a very powerful ability. Intrinsically, it doesn't mean anything, right? Exert is only as good as the text that goes on the Exert cards.
Yeah, but you can tell that R&D has leaned heavily towards attacking and making your attackers better.
But the aggressive cards with Exert are extremely powerful.
Yes.
Giving your whole team ++1 feels like an uncommon effect, and it's common in Talkrop Elite. Gust Walker... you even called it during the set review. You're like, I think this card's going to be great.
Yeah.
And it is.
Yeah.
It hits for 2 on turn 2 or turn 3, right? When they don't have a blocker. Then it just starts cracking for 3 every other turn. It's very hard to stop. And Nefcrop Entangler is a slightly milder version because it's a little easier to block.
But it's still a 2-drop.
Still, it's a 2-drop. And it just makes it... these cards really punish people who are trying to block. They punish people who are doing slow things, especially since they have a lot of reach. You can stabilize against a red-white deck and then die to a Gust Walker from 9.
Easily, yes. A Pathmaker Initiate can chip in a couple of damage.
Or they just stack up a bunch of creatures and then attack with Talkrop Elite, and all of a sudden things don't look so good, even though you did stabilize.
Yeah, and you're talking about commons here. I mean, there's also cards like Trial of Solidarity, as an example of a card that can just blow out a game that looked like it was close.
Yeah, and that's the sort of card that... rewards you when your plan's going well, and is a backup plan when your plan's not going well, because you just take a couple turns to regroup, and then all of a sudden trial becomes great again. So
and it works well with Exert, and it makes it hard for your opponent to race. And,
you even have like Emberhorn Minotaur. It's extremely hard to block. You don't want a lot of them because they're expensive, but like again, once you have these cards down, it just puts defensive decks in a really hard place. So
I have a theory, by the way.
Yes.
About partly why these aggressive decks are being successful right now in the format, and I think that part of it is something that you and I have addressed on the show, in fact, back in the set review we did, which is that cycling isn't free, right? And I think a lot of people are putting a lot of cycling cards in their decks kind of willy-nilly, just like, oh, I'll cycle it, whatever, no big deal. If I can't play it, I'll just cycle it. But that comes with a very real cost of tempo, right? Of you not doing anything for that turn, spending your mana and not affecting the board in any meaningful way. And I think in a normal game, which is what we were noting in the set review, was just like, you have to factor that in. Well, now you factor it in when people are trying to kill you soon, now, ASAP. They're pounding you with these cards, these combat tricks, these exert creatures, and some of these big payoffs in uncommon and rare. And when you do that and you think, well, I took turn 2 off to cycle a card, and then I played a monument on turn 3, like, you've done nothing. And these decks are going to just eat your lunch, because when you finally do play that 4-drop or 5-drop that you're trying to stabilize with, there's like, exert my guy. And now, you mentioned it, Gustwalker flies over you, the Entangler trades for your 4-drop. The Emberhorn Minotaur, you can't block it, you take 5. And your life total is just plummeting. And I think that like a lot of people are not properly framing cycling and cards that don't really affect the board that much against these decks. Because, Luis, I gotta say, man, the thing that stands out to me is how all in these aggro decks are. Because I'll draft an aggro deck, no problem. But they're playing mediocre 1-drops and as many of these red cartouches as they can
red
get.
and white cartouche, just get in there.
Yeah, those are low impact cards in general. They're short term gain for long term, really not that great. Yet, a card like the Cartouche of Zeal, right? Your creature gets +1/+1 haste and their guy can't block for a whole card. That's generally not worth a card. You wouldn't want to run very many of those. It compares like to the Kopesh. It's a card that doesn't have a big impact on the game over the long term. But in the short term, it absolutely does. And if there is no long term, then nothing else matters. And I think that, people are going to have to start adjusting the way that they build their decks and their expectations for cycling and what they're going to be able to get away with as far as doing slower, longer game, more controlling things, because these decks can hammer you for it.
Yeah, let's start by talking about red-white, since that is the kind of the flagship. It's a pretty simple strategy, beatdown tends to be. You want basically as many 1s and 2s as you can get. There's just no limit to the amount of 1s and 2s. Bloodlust Insider doesn't actually stack well in multiples, so you don't really want like 3 of those, but 2 is actually fine. Sacred Cat is a playable card in this deck, because you're trying to go wide. You're trying to play Trial of Solidarity, Cartouche of Solidarity, and then you're trying to stack up enough creatures that you can just get in there. Yeah. And then you do want some 3s, because Thresher, Lizard, or Retcrop Spearmaster are powerful cards.
Yep.
But you don't need to prioritize them, because they're pretty interchangeable, and you don't need 6 of them. The only 4s, the premier 4 you want, at common is the Talkrop Elite.
Yeah, sure.
You'll play out. I think it's about as... you wouldn't play 6 of them, but you would play 4 of this card.
Yeah, definitely. Because you play it on turn 4 and you're in the driver's seat.
Or you play it on turn 5 with a Cartouche of Zeal, and then you're definitely getting in there.
Then they're dead, yeah.
Emberhorn Minotaur is kind of like a backup to Talkrop Elite. Talkrop Elite is the elite of 4-drop.
The Minotaur's good.
The Minotaur is good.
The card hits so hard.
But basically, in order to draft this deck, you want the cheap cards as well. Besides the red and white cartouches, Magma Spray and Compulsory Rest are both good in this deck. I've heard tales, I'm not going to stand behind them, of people not liking Electrify in this deck because they just don't want that many 4s.
Yeah.
And that just kind of shows you what the deck's about. I'm not saying you should go cut Electrify, but if you're looking at Electrify and something like any of the good 2-drops, you should probably take the 2-drop.
Yeah.
And that, not generally how I like to draft, but I think in this deck it's actually correct.
I watched a very successful... Sorry to interrupt. I watched, just to prove back up your point here, I watched a drafter who has had a lot of success on Magic Online pick Gustwalker over Cast Out.
Yeah.
Pack 1, pick 1, which I was like, what? But Gustwalker is...
Gustwalker is the best
super critical, yeah.
Basically, this is a curve deck. You're trying to draft to your curve, and your curve wants to be concentrated at 2.
Yeah, so a few 1s, 2s.
Gustwalker, Nefcrop, and Tangler are the best 2-drops. Binding Mummy can be good in this deck if you have enough zombies. It's kind of hard in red-white to end up with too many.
Yeah.
But it's still a 2-drop, and it still works with your primarily embalmed creatures or other copies of Binding Mummy. Pathmaker Initiate is playable in this deck. It's a way to get the last 6 points of damage in.
Yep.
It's not a premium 2-drop.
Right.
And then really the 3s are all interchangeable, and the 4s Talkrop Elite. So that's like the deck. You want red and white cartouches. You don't want to overload because you want, I think, something around 17 to 19 creatures if you can get them in this deck.
Yeah. And this is often a 15 or 16 land deck, right?
Yeah. The only spells you want are basically like cheap pump spells, brute strength as well, cheap removal, magma spray, compulsory rest, and go wide cards like Trial of Solidarity. You can pursue glory in this deck, though it's not nearly as good as Trial.
In Oketra's name?
Inoketra's name is generally not great in this deck. Okay. Giving +1/+1 to your team, because very few of them are zombies, is just not really the effect you're looking for.
Right.
You still can play it, but it's just not amazing.
Here's a question. Are you playing Oketra's Monument?
It's a controversial one.
Right, because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have that immediacy, but boy, can it spit out a bunch of tokens.
If you have enough of the go wide stuff like Talkrop Elite or Trial of Solidarity, Oketra's Monument becomes much more appealing. Otherwise, in the straight up curve out, but not necessarily go super wide or have these mass pump spells, I don't think it's great. It just, you don't want to take turn 3 off in order to get 2 warriors later.
Right.
So this card's value, I think, is going to fluctuate over the course of the format, just because it's hard to know exactly where it lands.
I feel like it's a little overrated at the moment, but though
it maybe started out underrated.
Monument. Yeah, exactly. Clearly the best of the monuments, though.
It is, though. Yeah. That's not saying a ton, since I think the other monuments, except potentially Ronus' monument, are fairly bad.
I agree.
So this deck is fairly easy to draft once you kind of know that it's there. The big takeaways that are somewhat counterintuitive is cards that cost 4 or more are at a premium in terms of slots. You cannot afford to play that many.
Yeah.
Part of the strength of this deck is that it curves out and has a low land count. Those are both things that the deck leans on. So you're looking at something like 4 drops and not a whole lot more than that. Cycling cards like Winged Shepherd or Desert Ceradon are acceptable in the deck, but they're not something that you generally want a lot of, because you don't want to waste your early turn cycling, and you don't want to get to 6 mana when you're playing 15 lands.
Totally.
So this deck's really aggressive. This is one of the gatekeepers of the format. When you see your opponent just play, go Gust Walker and a Thresher Lizard, you're under the gun. If they have any of the pump spells, if they have a removal spell, all of a sudden all your sweet plans are just crushed under the boot of these aggressive creatures.
Yeah, and it compounds on itself too, because like you said, it's already hard to block with these exert creatures. They make your life, like, maybe you just don't have a block at all. And then the one turn when you're like, okay, I've got a 3-drop and a 2-drop, you attacked with your exert creature, I'm going to double block, that's when they can have the combat trick and just completely destroy you too.
Yeah.
So it's like they build, right? Like, not only was it already hard to block, again, this is primarily based on the fact that exert exists and that that R&D pushed exert as an aggressive mechanic. I mean, we have, there's cards that draw you cards when you exert or whatever. They could have done any, you get mana in your next, they could have gone any number of directions, but they said, and I think correctly, that the most straightforward way to do exert would be to make the creature better temporarily, right? It also is the most flavorful, right? It's like it's trying extra hard, but it's tired the next round or whatever. That makes sense to me. But as a result, we got to play what they gave us. And when they gave us these exert creatures, they are incredibly difficult to deal with in combat, and they will get you dead very, very quickly.
Yeah. So
what about the other color pairs? Red, black, and red, green, because these do play out differently.
Red-black looks a little more similar to red-white than red-green does, because red-black still has like a lower curve, a slightly higher curve than red-white. It doesn't have as many incentives to go wide without Trial and Talkrop Elite, so it's more just like cheap aggressive creatures and slightly more removal, because black offers removal.
Yeah, it's a little awkward though, right? Like their Magma Spray costs 3.
Yeah, Splendid Agony is just not as efficient.
Right.
And
it's a good card, but
basically black is a worse version of white for the aggressive deck.
Yeah, it does feel like that.
You're also not really leveraging some of the cards like Unburden or Wander in Death, are just not the kind of cards that fit into this red-black aggro that...
No.
It has cards. It has slightly more synergy with cards like Thresher Lizard in red, where you get a reward if your hand is nearly empty, because you have cards like Miasmic Mummy, or you have cards that reward you for having few cards in hand, but you still end up in a spot where your curve is just not going to be as good, and you don't have as many incentives to be aggressive.
Yeah, you have a slightly better, think of cards like Merciless Javelineer, in that color pair that give you access to an effect, a repeatable effect that can. It's funny because you think, oh, this is great. I can use it as like a removal spell over and over again. And I find that in that deck, it's more just like that can't block, attack you.
That is generally what it does. It's just a way to knock blockers out of the way.
Yeah, the counter's incidental almost.
But then again, if if red and black are open, you can draft red black and you can draft aggressive. So,
but it is just about a step slower, right?
It is. It's like you end up with maybe slightly better creatures in some senses, or slightly more expensive creatures. But the cost is that you're not as fast and you don't go wide as efficiently. You just have slightly better like mid to late game.
Yeah. Now, what about for the red green? Because I have seen people drafting this. As well. In fact, this seems to be the deck that wants the Bloodlust Inciter the most.
Yeah, because its creatures are generally beefier, so giving them haste is better. You have Hoodie Bee, Hooded Brawler.
Oh, yeah.
Which
Hoodie Bee.
Hoodie Bee is one of the reasons that blocking is so bad. You think Ancient Turtle should be good against an aggressive deck. When your 3-drop is a 5/4, it just does not work.
I know. It's just, and that is how these cards read in a lot of ways.
And green, it has actually better low curve options than green tends to. You have Initiate's Companion, the 3/1, you have the Bitterblade Warrior, you have Hoodie Bee. You can actually assemble a low curve red-green deck and really put pressure on your opponent.
Yeah, because you still got all the cards that you mentioned.
Synchronized Strike is awesome in this deck.
God, it's funny because, I still look at that card and I think, it's okay, like you might be able to set something up. I would say almost without fail, every single time I've seen that card go on this deck, it's like, oh my God, it's a huge blowout. It's like the game ends, or I lose 2 things, or I force that is well worth every bit of the 3 mana for a combat trick.
Yeah, and it's going to shine in the low curve red-green deck. Because red-green has two different decks here. There's red-green monsters, which is where people look first for this color combination. This is the Naga Vitalist and the Colossipede and Shafet Monitor.
Yeah.
And Desert Ceradon.
And greatest.
And the greatest of all the sandworms.
Right.
Whereas the red-green low curve deck is more on the Initiate's Companion and Hoodie Bee plan, where I think that deck actually tends to play out a little bit better because, again, red-green monsters type decks rely on blocking. Part of the reason that these decks have worked traditionally in Limited is when you tap out for your Colossipede, not only is it going to get to attack them the next turn, it blocks and gets you to that next turn.
Absolutely.
But when you tap out for Colossipede and they're like, okay, attack you with a 5/4 Hooded Brawler, or my 3/3 Flying Gustwalker attacks you.
God, they're 3 mana creature.
Or your 5/4 Menace Emberhorn Minotaur attacks you. All of a sudden you're like, their creatures are hitting for as much as my creature, and they didn't have to waste a turn on a ramp spell like Naga Vitalist, or they didn't have to wait till turn 5.
Yeah.
They put this card on turn 3. What is my incentive to go bigger? And the answer is there's just not a huge one. Cartouche of Strength gets a little bit better.
Definitely.
It's better with Colossipede than Bitterblade Warrior, but you still end up utilizing Cartouche fairly well in these decks because, again, cards like Hooded Brawler, you get to attack, exert, then post-combat Cartouche when it's still a 5/4.
Exactly, and nobody ever blocks.
Yeah, and that always happens. So the low curve red-green deck, basically what you're looking for here is less Naga Vitalist, Colossipede, Sandworm action, and more Initiate's Companion, Hooded Brawler, Bitterblade Warrior, Pump Spells. Brute Strength is really good with cards like Hooded Brawler. It's good with Bitterblade Warrior too. Death Touch plus Trample is a combo.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
That's a way to just get guaranteed 5 points of damage through in the late game.
Yeah.
And you still want Magma Spray. One of the things I want to note about Magma Spray, it's the best common. And
do you think it's the best common in the set?
Yes, I don't think it's very close.
So what would be the cards that would come to mind that we would
Compulsory Rest also is a competitor. There are some
Electrify
formats
when
where
it first came out. Yeah.
Final Reward would be good, but I actually just don't. I think the card's good. You'll always play it. You'll be happy with it in your deck.
God, it's so funny.
But Magma
Spray is good in this format. It kills Embalm. It kills Indestructible Gods, but you never have time to cast it.
Magma Spray is the best card against aggro and is great in aggro.
Yeah.
So Magma Spray is a great card to start with because no matter which direction your red deck goes, you're super happy having Magma Spray.
Yeah, totally.
And so you want to focus on those, again, cheap interaction. You're not quite as low to the ground as red-white, so cards like Electrify do get a little bit better. You're not going as wide, but you still have a high creature count, so cards like Synchronized Strike are very, very good. You want to tend towards the cheaper tricks, like Shed Weakness over Spidery Grasp, for example. Mm-hmm. But you're still creature heavy. You have room for 5 or 6 spells, and you want those to be removal and combat tricks. That's about it.
Yeah.
This is the deck where Ronus' Monument should be good, but I have not had good experiences with the card. And when I play against it and my opponent draws that instead of a threat, I'm usually pretty happy. So
yeah, I mean I think a good litmus test for this is, okay, let's play out 100 games or 1,000 games against each other, and I will substitute one Hooded Brawler for one Ronus' Monument.
Yeah.
Right? It's a 3-drop, right? So some of the games, in half of the games, on turn 3, where I would have played a Hooded Brawler, instead I play a Ronus' Monument, and in the other half I play the other. I mean, I don't have the data, but I would bet money that the person who just plays a Hooded Brawler on turn 3 is going to win more games than the one who plays a Monument on average.
But then you might ask, well, what if you play the Monument later?
Sure. I shouldn't have said that.
Then the question is,
what I meant
how many creatures do you have left in your hand?
Yeah, in their deck is what I meant, not on turn 3. I would bet money that the person who has it in their deck, because again, like you said, if you draw a Hooded Brawler on turn 6, you're like, you're taking 5 next turn, or you have to deal with this thing. Yeah. And if you draw Ronus's Monument, you're out of cards. You're just like, please send me a creature from the heavens. Yeah. And that just doesn't happen that often. And additional to that, we've been talking about how good these red-based aggressive decks are. If you're just like, Ronus's Monument, go, they get to slam you. No trading, no blocking. They just get to crash into you on the next turn for whatever they can put it, to you. And then Ronus's Monument looks awful, because what are you going to do? Like, you play a creature, you're like, pump my 2-drop, go. I have to block. Like, I can't. It's now too hard for me to race from this situation.
Well, what you want to do ideally is something like turn 3 Hooded Brawler, turn 4 Ronus's Monument, initiates Companion because it's 1 cheaper. Pump my Hooded Brawler, attack. The problem is that we're veering a little too far into best case scenario land.
Yeah, Christmas land, or whatever. Yeah,
I just think that you can do better than that. So
agree.
One of the keys with red green is knowing which direction you're going. I would tend towards leaning towards the low curve version, but knowing that the high curve version is out there and a little bit less easy to draft, but still there. If you have enough early interaction, if you have if you have Magma Spray, then you're able to survive long enough to play Colossipede. And it's not like Colossipede is not a castable card in red green.
Sure, no, you can
in the low curve red green deck, but you just don't want too many cards that cost that much mana, because you're still looking to play like 16 land, and your curve end to 3 to 4 in a lot of these decks.
So we did a show a while back now. Cabs theory and Uber theory, right? Those are 2 separate shows. It is still funny, by the way, that you came up with Uber. Cabs being the cards that affect the board state. And the decks that we just described are almost all pure Cabs decks.
Neither of of the 3 decks we just described, basically the only one that's going to play cards that don't fit into this model is maybe Black will play like a Wander in Death.
Yeah.
Other than that, like, you're talking pump spells, removal spells, and creatures.
Yeah, just the most slimmed down. And again, what we've seen is that the players are trying to be the fastest possible version of these decks.
That is what players' preference is right now, and I think it is correct. Basically, you ask yourself, would my red deck want Bloodlust Insider or Cartouche of Zeal? And if the answer is no, then you're not the fastest possible version.
That's right.
Because the fastest possible version does want these cards.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting as well is looking at these decks and kind of prioritizing them, which order you put them in. Let's say you started with Magma Spray and Nefcrop Entangler, right? You've got 2 good red cards. They both lean aggressive. Which color would you choose to pair with them? It starts with white, then it goes green, and then I think black is my least favorite.
I think so too, yeah.
And then blue is not something I'd really even have on the table. I think an aggressive red-blue deck is not something I found to be as good as just an aggressive deck of these other colors.
Right.
So if your next pack is equal value white, green, and black cards, I would take the white card, and barring that, I take the green card. Barring that, I take the black card.
Right. Yeah, the other interesting thing about the cab stuff, too, is cycling a card is not...
Yeah, notice we didn't mention that many cyclers.
Yeah,
like, these decks will play them, but begrudgingly.
Yes.
And not prioritize them.
Right. And we mentioned that in the card that we opened, too. We got the Shepherd.
Yeah, Winged Shepherd.
Yeah.
Playable card, but when you're playing 15 land, it's like, yeah, I'll play this as my 24th card or 25th card. I'm not going to play this or take it over 2 mana, 2/1 with marginal upside.
See, and that's the thing, is that I think people are too willing in general to be like, oh, whatever, it cycles for 1. And while that is true, and it is not a huge impact on your deck, I think that, again, you said begrudgingly people will play those. I think that if you could just not, you just would choose not to.
Yeah, and the difference between cycling 1 and 2 is really big, especially in these decks. So Greater Sandworm is not a card I'm really hoping to play in my aggressive deck, which is sad because that's a very good card. One thing I want to note to kind of update from last week, by the way, is when looking at how a lot of games play out, actually there's a lot less text on the Amonkhet cards once they're in play.
Explain.
It feels more like a core set once the cards are in play. A lot of the complexity of the card is in like cycling or
when it's in your hand.
Yeah,
interesting.
Something like that, or even like Exert is not that complicated because it's just power and toughness or plus and death touch, like things that are on the board that just change the stats of the creature. So it feels like there's a lot of cards with fewer text than we would see in a set like compared to like Kaladesh had a lot more text on the cards in play.
Yeah.
And so that makes me, it's just an observation about the format. That it doesn't push me. It doesn't necessarily push you in any direction. But if it's a lot more about stats and cost, and the one thing they line up correctly, aggro can be great, which I think we're seeing that being the case.
Interestingly, as well, we should talk about this from a bigger picture perspective from a set as well, which is that when the Cabs style decks or just the aggressive decks, are as good and consistent as you can get them here, they tend to set the tone. Right, if you want to draft a crazy build around deck or a super controlling, Uber style deck, you are limited by how good the aggressive deck is in the format. It's not the other way around. The sooner the deck can win, if it can do so consistently through your game plan, the more it stifles your ability to say, "Ooh, Sandworm Convergence."
Well, there's a reason I called Red White the gatekeeper of the format. There's
that really stuck with me when you said that as a perfect term for it.
Yeah, it's the reason that people call Mono Red, the Fun Police in Cube.
Yeah.
The fastest, reliable, aggressive deck is what you have to prepare for. If you're able to handle that, you can generally handle things that are a little bit slower. But that is where it set that sets the threshold of I know this is out there. I need to prepare for it. And what my deck can do. How much room do you have to play cards like Trial of Knowledge in your deck? The answer is a lot less than I'd hoped.
We were in an Uber, not the theory, but
the actual card.
The card, earlier tonight, and we were talking about Trial of Knowledge, and I'm just like, that's the kind of card that you show me. I read it, and I think this card's very powerful.
It is a powerful card.
Yeah, 4 mana, I'm drawing a bunch of cards, and I even have the chance to redo that later in the game for just seal the deal. And I mean, for me, that type of card has gone down in value considerably. In fact, it feels like every time I cast it, I get kicked in the head the next turn so hard that I kind of put myself out of the game.
Yeah,
and for me, that is sad, because I like to have a lot of different decks that I can play. And I'm not going to say that you just straight can't play those other type of decks, but the Fun Police are here, man. they are in the building.
Oh, trust me, I have some ways to make these decks work, but
yeah.
I think that when focusing on the aggressive decks, that is a good place to start with the format. And this is not, again, last week we expressed concerns we had about the format. The speed of this format actually has allayed some of those concerns for me.
It actually kind of has for me too.
Because if you don't have time to mess around with cycling, then some of the bad parts about cycling don't come into play.
No, but this just isn't the solution I wanted, Luis.
Well, I cannot criticize a format for being faster than I personally like.
No, definitely not. And
I mean, I can tell you I'd rather draft decks with Trial of Knowledge,
of course.
But that has nothing to do with...
It's actually kind of refreshing to have a fast format sometimes.
Yeah, I think it is fine.
Yeah, but I am a little concerned if I don't get to do that stuff ever.
And I think that we're not at original Zendikar levels of speed.
No, because it's only a few decks like the ones we've been talking about. But
one of the things that these decks do push is how bad it is to block. Both when you have cards like Cartouche of Zeal, which prevent you from blocking, Crop Crasher at Uncommon does the same thing. You have good evasive creatures like Gustwalker. You have, cards like Talcroft Elite that pump your whole team. Once you get to the point, Hooded Brawler just running over your blockers, you're not where blocking is bad. It does incentivize you to just draft attacking decks and to have less interaction. Because blocking is the most interactive or most common interaction in Magic.
Yes.
How you stop their creatures is by casting a creature to block.
Yes.
And
even if that's passive sometimes,
right? It is. Even if your 2/4 keeps back 2/2/1s, you're interacting there.
Definitely.
Trust me. This format kind of punishes that, and if it's at too high of a degree, that does reduce the amount of interaction. And I do like interaction, regardless of at what level of speed it is. Interaction is a lot of the fun of the game.
Yeah,
so,
totally. And a lot of the bombs we talked about are hard to interact with.
Right.
That was a little more sealed specific at this point.
My
but
opinion
again,
of that hasn't changed.
They're not problems anymore.
Yeah.
Your Hooded Brawler beats their 5/3 flyer, right? You don't care. You're just attack.
I do think that the format's quite bomb heavy. My opinion hasn't particularly changed.
This is a Prince format. I have not moved at all. Yeah.
One other aggressive deck we did want to talk about was Black-White Zombies.
Yes.
And it's a little more different. It's a little different from these decks in that it has more synergy because it's built around zombies. It's got kind of the flagship at common is a Binding Mummy. This card
is overperformed since day one.
A good zombie deck that has 3 Binding Mummies, your opponent can never block. which is more of what we're talking about.
Have we said that this show yet? Or?
At uncommon, you have a Wayward Servant, which drains them for 1 every time you play a zombie.
Inevitability.
And that offers, inevitability, a little bit of reach. And then past that, a lot of the zombies are just like cards that tend to work well with each other. And you have Inokitra's Name as a common pump spell that it's like a common Trial of Solidarity.
It feels like it
for the zombie deck specifically.
Yeah.
Lord of the Accursed in uncommon as well that gives all your zombies +1 and menace. So basically, with 2 really strong uncommons, a really strong common at Binding Mummy, a solid common in Inokitra's Name, that's enough incentive to draft zombies. And then it turns out a lot of the just decent black and white creatures are zombies, and everything, of course, that embalms comes back as a zombie. Yes. So what you're looking to do here is you want to pick up as many zombie enablers as you can, because those tend to be the best cards, with Inokitra's Name being the worst of them. You don't really want 4 of that card generally. You want like 2 to 3.
Yeah.
And even then, once you're at the point of playing 3, you want all your creatures to be zombies.
I was going to say, I'd say 1 to 2, yeah.
You want to fill out your curb. Those Who Serve is quite serviceable.
It's fine.
In this deck.
It's totally fine.
Fanbearer also. Fanbearer's a good one.
I'm a fan.
And so is it. And you end up just kind of casting some zombies, casting cards that care about zombies. You can play non-zombie creatures in the deck. Ideally, they have embalmed, so they're like half zombies. But even if they don't, like, you're still just going to play like
the 3/2
Gustwalker, for example.
Gustwalker always makes the cut. The 3/2 Vigilance.
Talkrop Lead is still good in this deck.
Yes, totally.
Especially if you're going wide to take advantage of Inokitra's Name.
Yeah, this actually is my favorite of the aggressive decks. I don't think that it peaks as high as, say, the red-white deck does, but the red-white deck, if you do, like, let's say you mulligan to 5, and you look at your hand and you're staring down at like a couple of lands, a Bloodlust Insider, a 2-drop, or something. You're kind of like, well, I've got a couple of the tools I need, but I am not going to fare well if my opponent just plays spells on consecutive turns of the game. Where when I look at the zombies deck, it actually has the ability to change gears. It's a little more resilient. We were talking about the cartouches, the red and the white cartouches. Well, you know what's good against that? Magma Spray. And it's just like, and you're like, wow, like what a blowout. If they Magma Spray one of your mummies, you can still make a game of it. You can still build out a board. You can still turn the tide back in your direction. It's much better at coming back from stumbling or getting a little bit behind. Even if it does give up some of that early just get you dead now aggression. And I really do think that there's a lot of scenarios where these just hedge back a little bit. You're still playing 2-drops. You're still playing a few 1-drops with the Fanbears. They can really pay dividends.
But you're more likely to play 16 or 17 land into this deck than 15, for example.
Definitely.
One other like side benefit of the format kind of shaking out this way is the Zombies deck gets to play Cartouche of Ambition, and Cartouche of Ambition is one of the best ways to fight against aggro.
Totally.
You play a Cartouche of Ambition, you kill one of their creatures, or you even just shrink one of their creatures, and you crack in for 4 to 5 points of lifelink damage. It's going to be really hard for them to raise.
That might be the game.
Even putting it on Those Who Serve is effective. 3/5 lifelink that shrunk one of their creatures is just great.
Like, if you've ever been on the wrong side of that when you're trying to be the cartouche deck or whatever, it does not feel good. Like, you're going to get smashed by that. One of the things I wanted to bring up to you, Luis, from a design perspective, I noticed that a lot of the cheap creatures have 2 toughness rather than 1. Cards like Fanbearer, we just talked about. The
Ruthless Sniper.
Ruthless Sniper has 2 toughness. There's a few of these cards that are poking around, and my assumption is that was done so that you could put your own -1/-1 counter on it occasionally, especially on the utility creatures.
Yeah, Naga Vitalist as well.
Naga
you
Vitalist.
See a lot of 1/2s because they're good homes for your own counters.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, I think if this wasn't a -1/-1 counter theme set, those would just be 1/1s. Like Fanbearer would probably just be a 1/1.
Yeah, Naga Vitalist likely to be a 1/1.
Yeah, and so it always makes me a little sad because the cartouche sometimes doesn't kill it. Like, that stupid Fanbearer gets to live through it, but the lifelink is huge, and the +1/+1 is huge, and I like that. I like that card a lot too.
Yeah, so
the Mirror Breaker.
It really is. Mm-hmm. Zombies decks can range from the hyper aggressive with 3 Binding Mummies and a Wayward Servant, 2 Fanbearers, and their curve ending mostly at 3, to slightly slower where it's got copies of Final Reward. It's got
Sparring Mummy. And,
it's got a slightly higher curve, and it's going to rely on the fact that its cards all work together quite well. But as long as you have basically 2 to 4 zombie payoff cards and 10 or more zombies, your deck is going to be good.
Yeah,
it's hard to get too wrong when you end up with that part of the equation.
Heavily common based deck, which I like, but the uncommon and rare payoffs are great. You get to kind of free roll those. You mentioned the Wayward Servant and the Lord of the Accursed as being like 2 premium cards for the deck. And then, going beyond that, Liliana's Mastery. Like there's cards that other decks are like kind of like, that can have a really big effect on your, they can be the best
Plague
card
Belcher,
in your deck. Yeah, Plague Belcher can be really good.
Some good utility here.
Totally.
One of the ways to get into this deck is you start by drafting a white-based aggressive deck, and maybe you pick up a Binding Mummy and a Fan Bearer, and then you see one of these uncommon payoffs, 5th or 6th pick. You can get 6th pick Wayward Servant pack 1. That's not unreasonable.
Not at all.
And when you do,
you're the only deck that wants it.
You know the coast is clear, and you can move in on that.
Yeah, nobody splashes for it. So.
And these are the most effective aggressive decks we've found in this format. The 3 red-based aggressive decks: red-white, red-green, red-black, and then of course the black-white zombie deck.
The one other one I wanted to ask you about that's not on the list is green-white Exert. Have you had much experience with green-white?
I have not been impressed with this deck. I've found that basically the Exert cards are good enough on their own that you don't need to try to draft the deck taking advantage of them. And it has worked out better to pair the good aggressive white Exert creatures with other colors
that have better removal.
And it's also worked better to pair the good aggressive green Exert creatures with other colors, just because I just have found that there's no big incentive to go green-white. If green and white are both open, you can draft green-white, or you end up in a position where those are just the best cards that you're seeing in every pack, but it's not the same. You're not going to reach for it the same you'll reach for red-white.
Okay, so that sums up the aggressive decks. I want to tackle one concept before we take off for this week here. That's going to kind of foreshadow some of the things we'll talk about later in the as this set develops. We're going to talk about some of the ways that you can combat aggressive decks as we go down the line. Some of the color pairs and strategies that we like, some of the cards that have stood out. But the concept that I want to hit on before we do, again, to kind of foreshadow that, is one that we've talked about on the show before. It's called defensive speed. And this is the notion that because you are a slower or control deck, that does not mean that you get to not affect the board in the early stages of the game. Those are the type of cards I start looking for. And look, they might not look like great cards, right? These might not be the type of cards that you're just like, wow, Dune Beetle, like, wow, that's a great card. It's just a medium minus card or whatever. But if you are going to have any hope of beating these types of, especially the all-in aggro decks, you are going to need to commit to not doing nothing in the first few turns of the game so that you can set up the later part of your game. And you're going to want to start looking at the card file in the colors that you're in, for the types of cards that you could conceivably put in. The other thing that I think comes up when it comes to defensive speed is keeping an eye out for key sideboard cards. Just cards that are, again, sometimes overlookable, sometimes just not that powerful, but that let you impact the board in any way in the early stages of the game can be a really big boon if you're trying to keep these off. Because, I mean, you've seen it. Like, if you can keep your life total relatively high and keep these hyper-aggressive decks afloat, you can punish the hell out of them.
When they draw Bloodlust Insider on turn 7, like, they are getting punished.
Yes, same thing with the monuments. And if you can set up a scenario where you get to, like, kill something with Cartouche of Ambition and attack them, like, that one turn can swing the entire game for you. But it can be hard to set up, and if you are at a critically low life total by the time that happens, it's not going to work out well for you. So, Luis and I love to go deep on these decks. We both love to draft slower decks. And I mean, I like drafting an aggressive deck too. I know I've seen you do it many times at the PT. It's not like, it's just a preference thing on what I prefer to play because it's more fun. But I also really want you, the listeners, to keep that in mind, the idea of defensive speed, because you cannot just say, I'm going to just cycle a bunch of stuff and I'm going to play some mana ramp cards. I'm just going to do nothing for the first 3 turns of the game. These decks are designed to be faster than the other aggressive decks. They're definitely going to be faster than you cycling and playing a mana ramp spell on turn 2 or turn 3. Spring to Mind's a cool card. I really like it. You could also just die after casting it, effectively. So keep that in mind when you're drafting these decks. And like I said, we'll get into more specifics maybe next week, maybe the week after, about some of the more controlling strategies, the cards that you should look for to try to combat these hyper-aggressive decks, because these are what's going on right now. The other thing is the Pro Tour starts in the morning, in fact, in mere hours. And we're going to be keeping an eye on that too, because there's every possibility that the metagame reacts.
I think that where a lot of people are, just from talking to people and seeing what people are drafting, seeing how people draft that GP from multiple different teams, this is where people are. People are on the aggro train. People, are interested in putting brute strength in their deck. They're interested in attacking with, Cartouche of Zeal. You're not going to see a lot of 7th pick, Cartouches of Solidarity in this Pro Tour. They're going to go earlier than that. Yeah. Whether that means people adjust and find ways to combat it, or whether that means it's overdrafted. Draft is self-correcting.
Yes.
If you have 3 people at the table trying to draft low-curve red aggressive decks, someone else is just going to beat them because they're going to be the only person drafting black-green, and their deck is going to be good enough because card quality still matters.
Totally.
And you can still end up in a position where if you're getting 5th pick Decimator Beetles, you're still going to do well.
Right.
And cards like Cartouche of Ambition are huge. People basically needing to prioritize cheap interaction, especially cheap interaction that does not involve blocking.
Yeah.
So you want, they're premium comments for a reason, but Magma Spray, Compulsory Rest, Cartouche of Ambition, these are all the kind of cards that really get you into it against aggro. And, I could see that those strategies working out well tomorrow at the Pro Tour.
I could too. Like you said, to sum it up here, right? Draft is self-correcting. You can know that this deck exists. You can even know that it's the best deck. That does not mean that the person to your right doesn't know that and that they just don't ship you anything, right? If they're drafting the same exact deck, you're not going to get it. You need to know how to draft other strategies. It's not like it's just going to be all red, white mirrors. That can't happen in draft. That's just one of the beautiful things about it. And I still don't think that forcing is proper. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's a smart decision to do if you care about winning the draft. So these are the things that you have to keep in mind when you're sitting down to draft Amonkhet. I do. My gut tells me, Luis, that we're not done with this format yet. No. I think this is
we're in week 3 tempo based.
Yeah, we're in tempo based. Green Sucks, I think, is next week, but we'll see. All right, that's going to do it for the show this week, Luis and I got to get this thing edited, and we got to get to sleep because we got to get up bright and early and show up to work for coverage in the morning. If you want to find us on social media, I am Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. We're both active on Twitter and everywhere else, so you can come say hi, ask a question, whatever it is that you want to do there. I want to thank our sponsor once again, channelfireball.com. Please do check out their YouTube channel. You subscribe to that, and you'll get draft videos and constructed videos from awesome players, whether they're highly skilled or entertaining.
Which one am I?
Don't say both, though you are actually both. You're going to learn something. You're going to have fun following the hijinks there. And then also, like Luis said, there's some pretty cool new forms of content going up there too. Shorter form stuff that can help you improve your game at Magic as well. Like you said, Paulo Vitor Damarosa put one up about playtesting for tournaments. And, that's Paulo. He's been playing professional Magic for years, and he's just going to give you his top 3 tips for that. That's just stuff you can't get anywhere else. And like I said, you can subscribe, and it'll update you as you go. Next week we'll be back home, and we're looking to have a guest here pretty soon, but we'll also be covering more about Amonkhet as a format as we work our way through. We certainly hope you will join us there. We'll see you then.
So, we're an ever-evolving product here at Limited Resources, LLC.
I need to turn off. I just need to...
And as such, we take very seriously people's feedback and or complaints about, sound quality. So we decided that we're going to spend some of our time to make sure that we have everything looking and sounding exactly perfect. So this is this week's mic check.
All right, so we're going to try out a couple of different mics. So we know we heard you last week,
even though you didn't hear us or me specifically.
Yeah, I take the sound quality on the show very, very seriously, like Luis said, and I actually had to work that file a lot just to get it to where it was. Luis was recording remotely, and we had a tough time. But we've got some mics that we have here for him to try out. And we're going to have him do mic checks with those for you guys, and then you can vote or just let us know on whatever, which one sounded the best.
Basically, the one that people like the most is what we're going to go with.
Right. Okay, so why don't you just plug in the other one, and we'll just do some regular mic checks with it. Okay. Okay, well.
All right. Check, check, 1, 2, 3. This is me talking about limited. Check, check, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. You can plug in the other one right next to you. And then just go whenever you're ready. I'm just going to record the whole thing.
Alrighty, check, check, 1, 2, 3. This is me talking about limited. Check, check, 1, 2, 3.
All right. Just, it's right there. There you go. Get close to it. That kind of mic you need to get close to.
All right. Check 1, 2, 3. This is me talking about limited. Check, check, 1, 2, 3. All right, that should be pretty good. We got a couple different setups here, and like I said, just go ahead and let us know which one you like best, and we'll go ahead and go with that one for next week because we just want the highest quality. That's what we strive for.